Okay, so good evening, everyone. I, Assis, on the behalf of Code Warrior, welcome you all in this session. Through this session, Code Warriors wants to promote the culture of open source, and as a guest speaker, I would like to call Vanshika. Vanshika Srivastava is the tech and the community evangelist. Her expertise happens in building the scaling community across Web 2, Web 3, and SaaS platform. She has been advocating for open source, plug into developer communities and startup ecosystem. So I would like to call up Vanshika to share her knowledge and continue the session. Vanshika, uh, you
Hello.
can start now. Yeah,
Okay, I hope I'm visible.
yeah, you are visible, Vanshika.
Hello all. Thank you so much for joining this evening. Super glad to be here, right? Um, I know Hacktoberfest is around the corner. I don't really want to make it, a lecture for any of you folks. But yeah, I will try to keep things around more of the experience learning so that you can understand how you can go about learning curve in open source ecosystem. So before we begin, I'll just quickly introduce you myself. Hi all again. I'm Vanshika. I'm a tech evangelist and a public speaker. I work around Web 2 and Web 3 projects, and my specialty in the entire technical space happens to be that I'm more of a developer relations person. So I develop, I curate content, and as well as, I work around communities too. And open source has something which has like changed my life like a lot. Why? Because I am not like someone who has pursued a degree in tech. I believe that in India specifically, you have like a lot of misconception, and actually, it's just not misconception. It's also a case in a lot of companies that you need to hold degrees in engineering or like some good background like BSc and all to get in the tech space, right? What open source differentiates in and what it can give you back is the community support, the learning, and the opportunities as well. Um, I always, get to hear a lot of things that, how should we begin our journey? What is the roadmap or of open source ecosystem and how to find the right fit? There's so many questions that comes to your mind when you want to get your journey started in open source. And I mean, it's completely all right to feel all these questions and, ask a lot of people that you might know in your network because that's something that even I have done. But one thing before we begin this entire session that I want to point out is that never take someone's they talk about their experience, right? Even I'm going to talk my experiences. So something from my journey might not work for you. So if it doesn't work out, just don't stop contribution because I feel that people just stop taking open source seriously. They're just saying that okay, it's Hacktoberfest going on, I'm going to contribute right now, and then eventually you disappear, right? I don't believe that's a very good practice when it comes to open source because open source is something that is going to stay. The project is going to stay. Your contribution is going to make a lot of sense to the community itself. And most importantly, the value that you create is of such a great, it's literally exercise for a lot of people, right? And we have this thing of code contributions and non-code contributions. I'll say all the contributions, whether they are done in the development phase or documentation phase, they are pretty much important when you are in your journey and for that project too. So these are the couple of pointers I really wanted to point out because I feel that it's very important to clear out the perception about how you can get started in your journey, but then doing it effectively and efficiently without feeling all these things which stop you in the process. uh, I've been there. I had friends in my community and they told me do DSA, do a lot of these projects, you can build a lot of things, right? But one thing that I really understood, that I tried out a lot of things, I explored as much as I could, and that taught me that what really works out for me and what doesn't. So it's a very important factor to understand in open source ecosystem is that sometimes things will work for you and for the person it might not be the same. So you're supposed to keep exploring and just not stop yourself just because you've heard that someone didn't really make into some certain position or some certain company, and use that for your framework, right? So yeah, with that couple of points, I do have a deck prepared, but I will try to talk again, around the experiences. This is like starting your open source journey with code warriors, and I'm super, super excited to be here and talk so many things around community and open source itself. So let's begin, right? Cool. All right. I hope my screen is visible. If someone can confirm, that would be amazing. All right. So let's begin the session, right? So, I mean, I did talk about myself pretty much here, and but I don't really want to go with what other things that I have done. But a couple of pointers that you can probably take note of, that I'm also an open source advocate, which means that for the entire ecosystem, I really, really believe that, there are a lot of there's a lot of elasticity when it comes to enablement, how many people are able to contribute. We recently, I had a chance to speak at Open Source India conference. This was Asia's biggest open source conference, if I'm not wrong, and this was the 19th edition I spoke in. This is 2 weeks back in Bangalore. And we talked a lot of things around open source. The entire topic was that open source is just not code, it's also community, right? And we definitely talked, like, how many ratios are there when it comes to developer base. And you'll not believe that the values that we actually derived from GitHub was like super cool, because, we think that the Indian developers don't contribute, but that's not really true. If you actually go on GitHub, the India specific website that's there, the landing page, you'll get to see a lot of good stuff that's really happening. And I think that's enough for all of us to be motivated around, open source. Now, open source, what does that mean if you are very, very extremely new? I will not say that it's just the software which is just open. And like a lot of people say that the source of a software is open, so therefore it's called open source. But there is a lot value that goes why it is known as open. But let's not go in the source, let's go in the word open, right? Why is it known as open? Because it's free sometimes, because there's also commercialized open source available, enterprise level. So yeah, but then it's mostly free, and if it is not free, at least it's available. You can always check out the GitHub repositories, and a lot of code base you can always initiate in the back end. They are my favorite open source projects that I'll give a shout out to in the end of this entire session, which you can probably check out and get in the community. But the most important part, like, yeah, open source, it's freely available. It's open to the contributions. You can collaborate, it's community driven, and there is developer education. So all of this is in one single particular ecosystem. Like, you don't have to really go out, step out of open source and be like, okay, I'm looking for more developer education, because the learning curve that's involved, and I always focus about this thing, right? People start contributing to open source projects with the fact that, they will end up into a very good job. I mean, that's your end point. You eventually get there. But that is not how you're supposed to begin. If you really think that from the very beginning itself, you will end up having a very great job, and you just really want to show your GitHub profile to recruiters, to all these people telling that, oh, I just contributed to these many code base, to these many repositories. But the most important thing that a person is going to check alongside of all these contributions that you have made is that how much have you learned, how much contribution that you have made, you have taken something out of it. So that makes a lot of sense. Even if you contribute to documentation and you eventually want to become a technical writer, you can always showcase it. I really contributed to documentation, and it doesn't really matter that you haven't started off with a code base. So if you want to begin up like that, also it's completely okay. even you, if you're in design like UI UX, you can always contribute in that format also. A lot of community projects require the front end, so you make wireframes. Eventually Oktoberfest also launched this particular thing where what happens is you can contribute in the design phase also, and they'll accept that as a contribution, right? So now that's something that's publicly being accepted. So you just cannot say that, oh, I'm a design person, so I should probably not contribute to open source, because it is not something that is being done by a lot of other people. So we begin somewhere in ecosystem, and if someone else is not doing, I mean, like, why not just go ahead and do it, right? So yeah, the other second part that we come on is that how to get started in open source. So there are a lot, like, couple of pointers that I already talked about, but very specific thing I really want to mention here is finding the right community. And why do I say that thing is because there's so many open source projects out there, and they have got their own specific set of communities, right? For DevOps, you'll always find cloud native communities, right? For technologies around Java, JavaScript, Python, other open source projects also. TensorFlow.js has got a separate community, right? So everyone has got their own set of communities. So something that's a very interrelated, like I would say correlated type of a thing is you understand the community you want to go in kind of aligns with your tech stack interest also. So let's say you want to learn something in front end. So you are a person who would be interested in React, React Native, JavaScript, right? So you need to find a community who focuses on the front end aspect, front end devs, right? But if you are a backend person, I have done full stack, but I am more of a person who loves doing backend. So my base of things is doing developer security. So I'm in the back of the things. And what I deeply understand is that my tech stack is going to help me choose my right community. Because you want to step in there, you want to learn things, and on top of it, then you shift to another community probably to learn another set of things. So that's a very important thing. Third point I want to say is that the documentation, it's literally the scope of the project. You cannot keep documentation, go into the code base and be like, okay, this is my favorite open source project because it has got these many stars or these many contributors, or some of my friends are already contributing to that open source project. It doesn't really make sense when you go from the code base aspect and not from the documentation aspect. Documentation is just not the format, like, it's not just written things, like, how you can use a project, how you can contribute to the project. It's more about also, like, you can see the future of the project. If the documentation is like really, really good, and you can probably see that what they're trying to build exactly, you'll understand that, okay, this project that I want to invest myself into it, right? You're going to put your time, you're going to put your contribution. You just don't want to pick any random open source project and just start contributing to it with the aspect of all these factors that can affect your decision about choosing. So once you choose your project, once you choose your tech stack, the next thing that you're going to do is understand your documentation. Ask the questions that are there in your head, by these devs that are there in the community, or developers that is available, developer advocates, like they're all the people in the community that are going to help you out with the project. So try to have a discussion with those people, right? And in the end, be inclusive and be patient. So sometimes what happens is that, let's say you find out an open source project and you really have got this question in your head, which is bugging you like anything, and then you're like, well, I'm just gonna spam some person. So that's not a very great practice. You need to understand that you come from a different time zone maybe, and then there's another person who has got their own set of things going on. And usually the maintainers and the core members of the project, they have got a lot on their plate. Like, trust me, right now I am helping out my open source project. Like, it's just not mine. I mean, like, where I exactly work, we are into developer security, more on DevSecOps also, we can say. And it's very difficult, to be responsive on time because I'm based in India, then someone's based in UK, someone based in another country. So we try to divide those things instead of like just, some one person being point of contact. And uh, one thing that even we do is that we don't spam. the Discord space that we have got. Because even it's just not from the point of maintainers, but also the contributor aspect. If we have got certain people in our community, what we need to do is that we need to respect their boundaries too. We just cannot be promoting our content, paying people, and then having no value out of that entire project. So that's like a very, very hardcore, I would say, point that you should always keep in your mind. Second thing is the inclusivity along with the side of the patients. So sometimes what happens is that, if you are a contributor and you don't really have like a strong background in some specific language or something, right? What you are supposed to do is not feel afraid of jumping in that space. Why? Because it's okay to be different, right? Uh, I mean, you might be in science, you want to check out CS. That's completely okay. As long as you are motivated enough to deal with all these things, learn all these things, until then, it's completely all right. So that's a very, very important thing that you need to have in your head, that you are inclusive, the other people should be also inclusive. Someone is in the community going around talking all these things that, oh, will not accept you with the fact that you don't have a degree, or with the fact that you don't have that experience. We can probably talk it out if that is the concern that they might be having from you being in the community, or is that something that they actually do, which means that they don't be inclusive. And open source is like completely about inclusivity. Um, that is where we actually, stand very differentiated. So yeah, plus one to that. Now, things to keep in your mind once you have done all these five things. Like, let's say you have found your open source project, you have found out your community, and now you're heading towards the actual journey, right? So, understanding that the structure of your PR, sometimes what happens that in the community, they always justify that if you are raising a PR, you need to add a tag. You need to tell why have you opened that PR, or maybe add some comments to it. So you need to understand that if you do not do that, your PR might not get merged. So you don't really have a right to complain about it. But then yes, if you are following these norms and still it is not getting merged, it's completely all right. One thing that I've always said to people if they're starting a journey is that never overlook the projects that are super huge, right? If there are projects with like 5,000, 8,000 contributors, like 20, 30,000 stars on GitHub, as as much like when you step up, you see there are a lot of GitHub projects with those kind of metrics, and they will have some kind of expectations from you as a contributor. So if you're not able to fulfill all those things because you're just a beginner, it's okay, and that is why you should probably shift to a project which is like more on the beginner friendly side. So all these research project which has got like 100 to 200 contributors, they are active enough to teach you things, they're active enough to provide you opportunities where you can contribute to. That's a more important thing rather than just finding out bigger projects and then thinking that if one merge one PR gets merged, it's like a very amazing thing altogether, right? Because again, quality over quantity. You might get 10 PRs merged in any one good open source project, and one quality PR merged in maybe a small open source project will make more sense rather than that 10 more PR raised, whatever PR that you raised, right? So yeah, keep another that's one thing that you keep in the mind. There's a discussion feature on GitHub. There's also discussion channels available on Discord. Use them wisely. Why they are created? Because so that you can have more seamless conversations with people, right? Um, Precisely, it's become very difficult to catch up with all the questions that people are having. So when you ask in public, that also comes under the part of the feature itself. But yeah, when you ask in public, you're just not helping yourself out with other people also, right? Like it's just something that you would do in your classroom that we would always think that if I'm going to ask this particular question, someone's going to make fun of us, right? And it open source that, I mean, like even in class, it doesn't really make sense. But open source also, it's like strictly something that I would say I don't have to really worry about. You have a question, you ask, and you ask in public, and that's completely all right. And by the time you're building, you ask that thing in public too, right? So that's another thing. Now, finding the right community and mentors. I just cannot specify the importance of this thing like in verbal sense because this is like more of an experience that you get. When you get the right community and mentors, it literally changes the way you are as in the open source ecosystem and sometimes even person, like if they're like really, really good friends of yours. So one important thing to understand in open source is that you are just not meeting the project maintainers and you're just not getting to know the community. You're looking for your next mentor, and you'll always step up from one mentor to another. Like today, I mentor people who are starting their journey in open source, let's say, right? And maybe 2 months down the line, I might be actually doing some sessions where I actually code, right? I want to do that thing right now as well, but the time is a constraint actually for me. So yeah, but the idea is that you find mentors where you just step up and you get better and better level mentors. They help you out to figure out how to go about projects. Sometimes they help you to become good at open source. Open source is a practice more than anything else. Like trust me, it's a practice. You might get into a great company and you still want to do open source because the satisfaction of making that contribution and then seeing that getting merged and that people finding it so helpful is literally like a practice to you because it helps you and other people as well. All right, so these are some of my favorite open source projects. Is amplification, there is Medusa. Kubernetes is like a quite big one, but yeah, I love the documentation, the way they have done. Um, I believe precisely the way they have their community completely organized. They do like a lot of sessions also. It's amazing. If you are a maintainer, you want to take your project from here to here. I mean, Kubernetes, the way they have done, it's a superb job. I worked at Vox CHQ as a DevRel, where we are open source developer security tools. So Vox CHQ basically like stands for a box of features that can be easily integrated with any SaaS startups with just few lines of code in developer security ecosystem. So you can have your audit logs, your directory string, your single sign-on, everything done with just two set of code. This is also a very beginner-friendly, I would say repositories. We are just beginning our journey in the space of developer security operations and overall building the low-code source tool for developer security. So if you're looking for projects also in Hacktoberfest, you can definitely check out this project. Get in touch with me. I'm there on, I'm there on GitHub. I'm there on Twitter. I'm there on Discord of Box CHQ as well. So if you really want to join and see, how you can start contributing to the project, feel free to do that. Right. So now the question comes, practically, where do we begin? Right. So finding the right set of repositories is a very typical task. Like you want to get those repositories, and sometimes you won't be able to like understand the code base also because the code can be super advanced for you and you are a beginner. You're just getting just started, right? So these are few of my 5 favorite open source repository. First timer issues, first contribution, Open Source Friday, Python project scripts, and code triage. They really have got tags and the PRs that they really accept is into beginner friendly. Really good set of people coming in. You can really find good minded people there because you are a beginner, someone else was a beginner. You can always chat about your questions, ask each other, make more friends there in the ecosystem also. So yeah, these are the very great, amazing. I personally love them. Also, there is Hacktoberfest going on. So what you can do is you can check out projects which are under an under open source in Hacktoberfest. One important thing to understand is that we are not supposed to stop contribution post Hacktoberfest. I've seen the rate of open source contributions are super high in October. And then once your Hacktoberfest ends, the contribution goes like all the steep, right? Why does it happen? Is it because Hacktoberfest has got like a lot of initiatives for students where you can just like, get some stickers, get some t-shirts, get some cool swag, right? In the long run, I mean, like short run makes you really happy that you contributed, you got that swag and everything. But in long run, when you actually see, um, it's not a very advisable way to go ahead, right? In open source, you're not supposed to expect anything, but here you already know that you can win a t-shirt, You do a your four PRs get merged and you will end up getting something really great. So that's a very important concept to take care in your mind that you are looking at open source from a long-term point of view and not something which just October 1st point of view, right? So yeah. Now comes the another question that how do you choose an open source project? So you check the license. It's a very important thing. The set of license that is being used in open source ecosystem. These resources are available on internet, which you can check out. You can check the last commit, the maintenance and the community activity. You don't want to join those kind of open source projects or fork those repo for contribution purpose, who are not extremely active on GitHub. So that's a very important thing that you check how commits are being made, how often they are being made, and if maintainer is responsive to the doubts. Number of contributors is not a very specific number, but yeah, I mean, like even having 100 contributors is a great number because you begin from like 10, 20, and then you go to 50. So slowly you really see that, okay, if the commits, if the maintainers and the community activity is really good, then you can go with the low number of contributors also. But if you want to decide on the contribution purpose, that like how much contribution you would have to make. So it's a bigger project, bigger community. They'll need like more contributors, and you'll have to do less amount of work because there's so many people doing so many contributions. Check the language and topics. So language like your whatever backend front end you want to do. Topic in the sense that how would you go about picking the kind of open source that you want to, whether it's gonna evolve around developers, security, or DevOps. Sometimes the ecosystem of fintech even. I think Medusa is an e-commerce open source project. That's a topic, another topic that you can probably think of. And another thing, go through documentation. If you feel that there's a gap, you have got an improvement to suggest, feel free to do that thing. Because I mean, you make a project documentation better, and there's nothing more cool than that. They really need someone to really, make sure that this thing that they have written as maintainers is understandable by the contributors because they would always understand what they've written. Sometimes it might not work out for us. So giving that feedback also on documentation makes a lot of sense. And with that, we come to the end of this session. For from the aspect of deck at least, I don't really want to like take huge amount of time, sharing that entire deck and everything because it's pretty much more of an action than me presenting and talking about it. But I would say these are the tips, these are the practices that you really, really need to consider when you are in the ecosystem. So yeah, over to you. We'll take up questions, and post that, we will try to answer, these things. Yeah. Ashish, are you there?
Yeah, I think Kasis is having some issues.
Cool.
Yeah, so we can start with the. Please, anyone have any queries, they can put in the comments.
I should have asked that actually earlier. That if you guys are getting any question in your head, like simply drop off in the chat box, then we can pick it up for later. But yeah, it's okay. We'll wait for it.
Yeah, let's just wait for a minute.
So, I'll just talk about Code Warriors also. By the time if someone has got questions, you can drop it off. But I really really love those communities which try to enable other people. They can learn, they can grow together, and that's something that even Code Warriors is trying to do. Uh, there are a lot of things when it comes to open source. There are multiple courses, there are multiple tracks that you want to learn, and what Code Warriors is doing is like super super cool. Like I think you folks have got like 2 lakh of these students, getting impacted, multiple events that are being conducted, and some hackathons also being organized. So, like, huge shout out to the entire initiative that you have taken. I would like definitely recommend the viewers to check out the community, join that, and if you feel like you want to be chapter lead or something, they have got the website also for that. So that's very, very cool. Chapter lead is something that always fascinates me because sometimes, like, some certain cities don't really have that same level of competency with the fact that, the interest is very different. So like in Bangalore, you'll see a lot of people being involved in tech, but in the north side, it's slightly different. Like there are other things also. So yeah, that's one another thing. I can't really see questions, but Ashish, if you have any questions for me, you can ask that.
Yeah, that seems like there are no questions, so we can close this session. Yeah, thank you, Vansika. Thank you for your informative session. We got a lot from you, and like many
Super.
of you will start with the open source channel as well.
Yeah.
And guys, in the
Yeah.
meantime, I will also share this Google form link which we can fill for the certificate.
Sure, sure. Just one thing we remember, folks, open source is not about your personal gain. Everything that you do for community is gonna eventually come back to you, of course. But in the first phase, it's more about how you create an impact for them. And if it's not happening right away, it's completely okay. You won't see these results happening in that particular meantime. But once you start being consistent, I would say it's consistency over the anything else. You check out a project, you even talk about that, you make a blog about it, you write Twitter threads about it, you are documenting your journey. Even that kind of contribution makes a lot of sense. So it's okay if it's not a code thing, or if you're like, trying to still get a hang of the entire project thingy. But the major thing that we all need to understand in this space is that the learning aspect that exists in the open source ecosystem is far, far more important thing than all the facilities that you get out of it. So, yeah, based on that, I think I would like to close the session also. This was amazing, amazing opportunity to speak to all of you, share some pointers out, something that has personally helped me and that really applies to like a lot of other people as well. So thank you so much once again for having me. It was super, super great to be part of this YouTube session. Uh, Again, give a check out on Code Barriers and join the community if you really like it. And again, it was great speaking to everyone. Thanks so much. Good evening and bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. And so we'll see you in the next session.